What's up guys? Today we're gonna try making a steak with the most insane crust possible. We'll be comparing a control steak to a dry brine steak to something even crazier. We're gonna attempt to make crust dust. We'll remove the crust from a cooked steak and use that to make a flavorful seasoning for another steak. Perhaps this is the key to that crust we've been looking for. But first, let's go get the beef. I recently saw my friend Guga season a steak with a steak.
I cook a steak and I make dust out of it, so I season a steak with steak.
So today we're gonna try taking it one step further. We're back at Costco, my home away from home. You're gonna wanna just bypass this entire section right here. Okay, so we've made it to the best part of the store, which of course is the meat section. Always make sure you're looking for steaks with the most marbling possible. Even through the vacuum bag, you'll be able to see which ones look best. We've secured the rib roast. My meat costs are through the roof right now, so toss a like on this video. No Costco trip is complete without a $1.50 hot dog. Okay, we have everything we need. Let's get back to the kitchen. The first thing we'll do is remove this beautiful rib roast from the package. And I'm just gonna remove the edge to expose that marbling. Next, I'll remove our first steak. This is gonna be used to make our crust dust. We're just gonna season this up with some kosher salt and freshly cracked black pepper. Crust is formed through a process called the Maillard reaction. When meat is exposed to extremely high heat, the result is that beautiful color, and in my opinion, the most flavorful part of any steak. As you can see, the crust on this steak is absolutely incredible. But I can already tell you the inside of the steak is gonna be scary. But fortunately, today all we care about is that crust. Okay, so what I'm about to do genuinely feels illegal, but we're gonna slice off that crust. So here we have our beautiful crust, which is all flavor, but let's just take a moment of silence for what's left of this steak right here. Before going any further, I'm just gonna try some of our crust. Wow. Salty, a little bit crunchy, you get that umami, that is unbelievable. In order to make our crust dust, we're gonna bring out the dehydrator. And I'm gonna start placing our crust directly on the trays. Dehydrating removes moisture, and it's how beef jerky is made. I'm hoping that by leaving them in long enough, they'll turn into chips that we can blend up into a powder by tomorrow. We're gonna dehydrate at 160 Fahrenheit overnight. While our crust dries out, I'm slicing off 3 primary steaks that we'll be using in this experiment. Okay, so we have our control, our dry brine, and our crust dust. We'll set these aside until tomorrow. Dry brining is a simple process that involves salting any type of protein the day before cooking. It not only seasons the meat deeply, but also dries out the exterior for a way better crust. We're gonna set this in the fridge overnight, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, it's been about 15 hours. Let's see what we got. It smells awesome, just like a cooked steak, but the texture is quite brittle. This is gonna be perfect for our seasoning. Honestly, I kind of wanna just end the video here. It tastes incredible. Now to turn this into our powder, we're gonna bring out our blender and fill it up with that crust jerky. The crust is completely dried out, but there's still some moisture from that fat, so we'll have to see if we're able to turn it into a powder. Get it into the blender, and let's see what happens. To my excitement, the crust jerky blended up perfectly, and we're left with a powdery, yet fluffy pile of crust. This stuff here is all flavor. It's time to cook our 3 steaks. We have our control, the dry brine, and the crust dust. Notice how the dry brine steak has changed dramatically. It's become darker in color, a little bit more firm, and the outside is completely dry. Time to season our 3 steaks. On the control, just some kosher salt and black pepper. Our dry brine steak already has salt, so I'm just adding black pepper. And finally, the crust dust. For this steak, I'm only adding the dust. I might add some salt after cooking. Time to find out which steak gives us the best crust. We're gonna cook all these steaks at exactly 630 Fahrenheit. We have our pan smoking hot and adding the control steak. This is a standard steak in every way. Just using high heat on a cast iron to build the crust, flipping frequently allows it to cook evenly, pulling at 110 Fahrenheit and resting on a rack to protect the bottom crust. Next up, the dry brine steak. As I mentioned, Dry brining is a game changer, and you can see how fast that dark mahogany color is being developed. This can really only be achieved through the dry brining process, and I have a feeling this one's gonna be hard to beat. And finally, we have our crust dust seasoned steak. My biggest concern here was that the crust would immediately fall off or that it would start to burn, but as you can see, it's looking real good. Fully consistent crust, and I honestly had no idea which one would be better. Our control steak looked decent, but you can see that slightly less consistent crust towards the back. The dry brine steak looked almost flawless with that deep brown color. Lastly, our crust dust steak. Slightly less dark than the dry brine, but extremely consistent and a beautiful looking crust. 3 very good looking steaks cooked the exact same way. And at this point, I just hoped I cooked them all to the right temp for an accurate comparison. Start by slicing the control, next the dry brine, and finally the crust dust. All 3 steaks were cooked to almost the exact same temp, relatively small gray bands, and that nice rosy pink interior. And I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. Okay, my mouth is watering while I edit this thing, so I guess that means it's time to eat. But first, just adding a bit of salt on the crust dust since we didn't add any before. Okay guys, thank you so much to my sister for being here. It is time to taste. Should we do this?
Let's do it.
All right, so we're gonna start with steak number 1, which is the control. Are you ready for some steak?
So ready. This looks amazing.
Let's go for a bite.
So tender, salty, delicious.
I wouldn't call it the best steak I've ever had, but pretty good.
I really enjoyed it.
That's what I like to hear. Okay, steak number 2. So Sophia does not know which steaks these are, but we do. Let's go for a bite.
I think I like this one better.
So this is the dry brine steak. It's a little bit more salty. It's been seasoned all throughout, and the crust is just a little bit better as well.
There's a bit more of a char flavor. It's really nice.
Now the one I'm most excited for, steak number 3.
Wow.
What do you think?
It's much more flavorful. There's this umami, salty, just mixture of deliciousness.
Do you notice anything different with the crust?
It's almost flakier, but
yeah.
in a good way.
That's a really good point. So interestingly, the crust is actually less thick, but I think it's more flavorful, especially compared to the dry brined one. But what it all comes down to is which one's better. Now, all 3 of these steaks were great. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely.
And I think 2 and 3 are definitely towards the top, but this time I'm actually going with 2, which is the dry brine steak.
I agree completely. That is a winner.
And not to mention, steak number 3 was pretty difficult to make. It involved a lot of steps, so not too realistic to make it at home, but the dry brine method is always worth it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun. How was it?
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Sophia's happy, I'm happy. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.